Yeah, but it doesn't have to do with you imagining a polar bear. It doesn't have anything to do with being rebellious or defying expectations. It's about how your brain works. So, do you know what the Freudian slip is? Have you heard this name, Freud?
No.
Yes.
It's okay. So
No,
now, no,
it's the
no,
same.
please don't speak. This is something that will blow your mind away, but you need to listen. And I will have to be very careful because the article over here uses um, um, an example which would be a bit inappropriate for sixth or seventh graders. So I'll have to freestyle and try to come up with a different analogy. So a Freudian slip is when you're thinking about one thing but you actually say another thing. Has it ever happened to you? And don't say yes or no because I'm sure it has. While you're talking to someone,
Yes.
you know that you're talking to Marco, for example, but you say I don't know Tariq. It just happens. Or if you are talking to a friend who's a bit overweight, so imagine an overweight friend, and you want to congratulate her because she says, "Hey, I've stopped eating so much, and now I work out all the time." And you can see this girl, and what you're saying is, "Oh, congratulations! Yes, you look." And instead of saying fit, you say fat. You're trying to say consciously. You're trying to say, "Oh, you look so fit," but you say, "Oh, you're so fat." Now, why does that happen?
Please let me give an
I'm
example.
sure that it has happened to you. So many good things that I would like to mention, but okay, let me say it this way. Let me say it this way. Whenever, whenever people are about to say the number six, there is a high percentage that they would get it wrong and they would say an inappropriate word. There's no need for you to say it. Just calm down. So it's something that could slip away, and it has happened to one of the greatest, the most popular presidents in the USA, George Bush, the senior, and he did that on public TV. Instead of saying six, he said another word. And no matter how successful he was until the rest of his career, people remembered him making that mistake. And I do think it's a mistake,
The
although.
dot on the whole white paper.
Sorry, what? The dot on the, yeah,
The
the
dot
dot
on
on
the
the
whole
white
white
sheet.
paper.
That's right. That's right. So no matter how good he was, people remembered that mistake, and I do think it's a mistake because it offended people. And if you give room for people to talk about it, then it's probably a mistake. So what this guy did, that's Freud, that he's considered to be the father of psychoanalysis. This guy did research on dreams and how people thought, and he would analyze them and he would interpret them, and he would be like, aha, if you dreamt about the fridge in your dreams, then probably it's about because you were hungry, and so on and so on. So he analyzed dreams. And people really respected his opinions until very recently. But nowadays, there are people, psychologists, linguists, and neuroscientists who say that about almost everything that he said was wrong. And people wanted to test this because Sigmund Freud's greatest idea was that we people have two types of minds. We have a conscious mind and we have an unconscious mind or subconscious mind. Let's call it conscious and subconscious mind. The conscious mind is what you use to control your ideas, right? For example, I know that if I take this pen and if I'm trying to draw a dragon, I need to do this and I need to do that so it looks like a dragon consciously. I'm analyzing it. But what's going on at the back of your head is the subconscious mind, and you can't help doing anything against it. It's working at the same time. So when I asked you to control your mind and not to do something, your subconscious mind said, I'm not going to do that. I do what I want. And it did what it wanted because you imagined the white polar bear. Although I didn't, I asked you not to do it. If I held a gun at your temple and I said, "Don't imagine a white polar bear," you would imagine a white polar bear. You can't help it. It's what your subconsciousness wants to do. So there is a bit in yourself that you cannot control. It's your unconscious mind. Now, people wanted to test this idea. Are there really two types of minds? So I will have to open Paint and explain this. There were three groups of people. Group number one, group number two, and group number three. And they were asked the same instructions. The instructions were to read words which seem similar. For example, they were asked uh, three groups asked to read words and phrases. Now, some of the words were, for example, mood or take, let's say. I'm just improvising here because I told you the example is a bit inappropriate, but you can read it. So, mood and take. And all these three groups had a different environment. This one was the control group. The control group was only told these instructions. Just read these words, and that's it. In the first group, what they did was they placed uh, food in the room. So there was food in the room, and they were asked to read this. And in the other one, they placed let's say com- not computer. What did they place? Sports gear, whatever. Doesn't matter. So the people who were supposed to read those phrases and those words in the control group got objective results because they were able to just focus on what they were reading on the text. In the sports gear room, the people didn't make any mistakes because the words weren't related to that field. They couldn't make a mistake while saying them. However, in the room where they placed food, when they were supposed to read mood, some of them said food because what their unconscious mind was doing was it perceived that there is food in the room and it wanted the food. So instead of saying mood, they would say food. And instead of saying take, they would say cake because there was cake in the room. Do you get it? So the idea is that this example proves that there is a conscious and unconscious mind, and that the unconscious mind can affect what you're saying. It can make you, it can force you to make a verbal mistake. It's the same example with the overweight friend. If you see that someone is overweight and she says, "I've been working out," your first idea is to congratulate her, like, "Wow, you will get so fit." But because of what your unconscious mind is seeing, it decides to be a douchebag and it says, "Wow, you'll be so fat." Do you understand?
Yeah.
There was another example. Where is it? With electrodes. So again, there were three different groups. One was control group, and the other two were different. And they were all connected. They were plugged in a machine, and they were told that if they make a mistake while reading, that they will get zapped. So the people who were told that they were going to get zapped made more mistakes while reading, and they made mistakes which were referred to that field, to the field of electricity, zapping, shock. Their mind was working against them. However, however, there are psychologists. How do I do this without showing you? Yeah, let's focus over here. There are psychologists and linguists and neuroscientists who say that that's not what really happens. They say that the reason why we make mistakes is because of how close the words are to each other, and that uh, they did an experiment where they put like a special helmet thing on people's heads so they could measure the brain waves, and it turns out that it's the same process when you're trying to say mood and when you're trying to say food, because there's only one letter that that's different in that case, or cake and take. So the brain is analyzing the letters and the context of the letters the same way. That's why we make mistakes. That's what they say. So, in a nutshell, there are people who think that it's part of our nature, that we react based on our unconscious mind. But there are people who say that it has actually nothing to do with that, and it's actually how our brain processes language. It's not about what we want, what we see. It doesn't mean that if there's food that I will immediately want it subconsciously. In other words, it doesn't mean that it is our inner speech. I'll end this um, there, and I'll continue with something different. These two articles are tight. They are focused on the same thing. Uh, it's this research is about why we are way harder on female leaders who make bad calls, and it has to do with the idea that there are gender specific industries or gender specific
Excuse me, teacher,
fields.
this is a new article, so this is the fifth one.
This
This
is the
is
fifth
harder
one.
than
This
the
is the
food one.
this
Okay.
is the fifth one. Yes. So
Can I say something?
yes,
I
son.
know the reason.
Why do you know the reason?
Because people think that women aren't supposed to be leaders because they're supposed to be something less masculine. So when they make a mistake, it's like, oh, you're a woman, see, you can't do it.
It has to do with
Exactly.
that. It is connected to that, I could say, although it's not limited to only that. Now, just for the sake of the activity, let me ask you, can you think of any male-dominated fields where there males would be the prime option, the primary
Builder,
option?
I
What?
mean, of course,
firework,
the army.
Construction.
The army, of course.
Construction, army, good.
Politics. Police. Oh, wait,
police,
politics.
yeah.
All right.
Well,
Okay.
teacher, because teacher.
What
Yeah.
about female-dominated fields?
I don't know, hairdresser,
Wait,
just
Fashion
sound.
what was it
designer,
called? I forgot what they were
model,
called.
fashion designer, model.
Fashion, model.
Restaurant, like to work at a restaurant.
Makeup
I'll
artist,
give you the most
A
important
waitress.
one. Okay,
Waitress.
waitresses. There are waitresses.
a flight attendant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Flight
flight.
attendant.
Flight
Yes, yes,
attendants,
yes,
all
yes.
right. But I'll give you the best one. It's a nursery school.
Yeah.
Yes.
A nursery
That's right.
school or kindergarten.
But teacher, that's
So
actually.
let's talk about
let's say-
this.
Okay.
Let me explain what happened over here. You guys are too young to care about politics, but there was a thing that happened with Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton ran for president 4 years ago, and she didn't become the president because they mostly focused on a mistake that she had made with involving emails, and it was a joint mistake by Yahoo and Hillary Clinton. At that time, the CEO of Yahoo was Marissa Mayer. Marissa Mayer. And obviously, that's a female name. And there was some kind of I wouldn't want to go into details, but what you need to understand is that there was a huge problem with people with emails becoming public. So it was a huge thing, and a lot of money was lost and everything. And the people were very harsh on the CEO, saying that that her position was not suitable for a female. And what's interesting is that it's written over here. I think it was written over here that yes, where in the tech industry, male leaders outnumber female leaders 4-1. So for every one female leader, there are 4 men. And they decided to test this. There was a researcher, Victoria Brescoe. She was a social psychologist at Yale. So she decided to come up with a case to to check if it was true that men and women are assessed differently with regard to the industry. So what they did was this. They asked volunteers to take part in their study, and she and her colleagues gave participants, pay attention, a fictional news story about a police chief in a major city preparing for a big protest rally. So there is a big protest going on, and the case is about how the police chief reacts. The the reaction was that several hours in the protest, it got out of hand, and the chief dispatched squad cars. So they sent the police cars. In one version of the story, the chief didn't send enough officers, and 25 people were seriously injured. So the case is big protest, it's getting out of hand, and the chief sends the police cars, but 25 people get injured. In one of the cases, the police chief, I mean the police chief is a man. In the second one, the police chief is a woman. Who do you think had it worse, the man or the woman?
Let's bet it's the woman.
It's the woman.
Yeah,
Of course.
probably.
It's the woman. Let me explain why. People usually think that the police force is more suitable for men and that they are more stable to make good decisions than women. It's not true. I'm not saying it's true. What happened? The result that they got was when they let the participants know what happened. The rating of the male chief, the police chief, dropped by roughly 10%. So people were like, oh, well, he made a decision, so he's not that popular anymore. When they told them that it was a woman who made the mistake, her rating dropped by 30%. So if we say that they started over here, the male and the female police chief, when they were told that they had made a mistake, the male police chief's ranking fell over here, but the female ones went over here, which means that people were harsher. And they even went so far that they wanted to demote her. They were like, why would a woman be a chief? Maybe she should be on a different position. Let her stay in the police force, but she should be doing something else. So they decided that they would try to assess the success in each regard. So they came up with a different story where they told the participants that the chief reacted on time and no one was hurt, that everything was okay. What's interesting is that both the male and the female police chief got the same results. So the basic idea I want you to understand here is that when we're talking about success, both male and female leaders are treated the same. They need to fulfill the same expectations. But if they make a mistake, people go easier on male leaders. That's the idea. However, to offer another perspective in this field, there has been another research. This is the sixth article and final article for today. It's on how we judge the mistakes of male and female leaders. So the stereotypes are the same, that that men should work in construction and the tech industry, and women should stick to a nursery schools and whatnot. So there was a woman. I think it was a woman. I don't know if she did it. Never mind. It was a study. It was a study at Pennsylvania State University and Villanova University, so very prestigious universities, which involved 300 undergraduate students. They participated in the study. And in the study, they were given a case, and they needed to provide their hypothesis to show to express what they thought. And the initial opinions, the expectations were that people would be much harsher on the women and not so much on the men, but it wasn't the truth. So basically, there are two different ideas about this, and there have been studies in for both sides. What they did was this. I'll read it because I don't want to get this wrong. So, researchers asked participants to read a series of fictional employee emails describing the behavior of male and female leaders who worked in the construction and or nursing industry. In each case, the leader had made mistakes, either of the task variety, such as mishandling resources or poor planning, or of the relationship variety, such as losing one tempers or ignoring employees' concerns. And of course, again, as is the case with every experiment, there was also a control group where no mistakes had been made. Let me explain this in other words. They were expecting that men would make mistakes in terms of organization, that they would forget writing down some numbers or stuff, and they thought that women, which is about demeaning, a bit demeaning. They thought that women would lose their temper and they would start arguing with the employees. They would be like, "How could you not do this? You should have listened to me." Blah 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 blah. It turned out that that wasn't the case. So the case didn't prove their initial hypothesis, which in a way, which is the exact opposite from the previous article. The expectations simply weren't true. Because to these 300 undergraduate students, it didn't matter whether it was a man or a woman who made the mistake. They only focused on the mistakes, but they didn't include they didn't approach the issue from a gender perspective. So before we finish, I'd like to just summarize everything that we talked about. Again, let me remind you that it's a good thing to cover all the introductory questions and write them down. That would be very helpful. We covered 6 different articles focusing on a different perspective. The first one was about why we dwell on mistakes. I told you it's because of our childhood that we are when we make a mistake in our childhood, parents are usually too harsh on us. They punish us, and we feel really bad. And in the future, when we grow up, we don't want to feel like that. So we avoid making mistakes. We take the easy route. But that has a huge effect because we lose our creativity. And the way for you to feel better is to accept that everyone makes mistakes and to be self-compassionate, to be a good friend to yourself. Then we talked about how Western and Eastern cultures tackle learning and how they approach mistakes. That in our cultures, Western cultures, we stigmatize mistakes. We don't like them. We hide them. Even teachers. But in the Eastern civilizations, in the Eastern cultures, they are an opportunity to learn, and everyone is very accepting of that. Please remember the fact I told you, the example I told you with the cube. Then we talked about what would be considered a mistake for us personally or the place where we go to. And we went through a couple of things that people do are not supposed to do in Dubai because they might get you in trouble. And I can guarantee this because a friend of mine went to jail for one night because he went for a summer job in Dubai and he didn't have his phone with him. And while he was walking down the street, there were 2 women in front of him. So he tapped one woman on the shoulder to ask for time, and the police saw him and put him in jail. He had no idea that that was the case. That's why you need to do research before going somewhere. And I promise you, I'm not lying. Then I talked about the Freudian slips. Sigmund Freud, who is considered the father of psychoanalysis, he analyzed and interpreted dreams. He thought that in our body we have a conscious and an unconscious mind. The unconscious mind forces us to make verbal mistakes. However, there are psychologists and linguists and neuroscientists who combat that idea. They're saying that it's not true. They disclaim it and they say that it's actually a process going on a linguistic level. It's how our brain processes language. Then we finished with how people are treated for their mistakes with regard to their gender. There is a poll that shows that people are harsher with women when they make a bad call at a leadership position, and there is a study that shows that that's not the case. So you have to really think about which one you would listen. And let me not forget that I also explained that they did an experiment with three different groups where they placed food, and people were asked to say take or mood, and they would say cake or food just because they were able to see that. Right. Questions?
I feel bad for your friend. Not gonna lie, I feel bad.
I didn't feel bad for him. He should have done research. He should have done research before
Should
doing it.
should have. True.
Right.
Teacher, this makes me
if-
not want to go to Dubai
Teacher,
anymore.
Yes,
teacher, if I had
same.
$1 every time I mistaked someone's name or something, I would be rich.
Yeah, it happens.
Bill Gates could
These
never.
are some
the
of the
same
most.
thing. If I went to Dubai
A billionaire.
and I got $1 every day, I made mistake like I made a mistake that they consider a mistake.
Mhm.
I will be like a billionaire right now
Yeah.
because
Bill Gates could never.
Teacher,
Bill Gates could
the
never.
lesson is over.
Let me just say this. These are some of the most important things you should know about this subject, although we'll expand on it next time. Next time, I will also talk about the special area.
But teacher,
Uh,
one big mistake is, let me just say this. One biggest mistake is when people run away from their mistakes. Literally, they run away.
They can
Definitely, I told
maybe
you,
even
the
put it
first
to
step-
someone else.
The
like
first
Reynolds
step
one.
is
Yes.
owing up your mistake and accepting it. Now, let me say this. I think that you can take very good arguments from these examples, so please don't forget them, remember them, because they might come in handy for the debate or for the essay. Now, I'm really tired, so I'll just, I think that we can wrap up this lesson, and I'll see you next time, all right?
Bye,
Alright.
teacher.
Okay.
Bye, teacher.
Bye-bye, hope you like the lesson.
Bye.
Have a nice
Bye,
weekend.
teacher.
Teacher, have a nice weekend. Bye.